So gut health and the microbiome. Now, these are definitely terms that we did not talk about, at least I've been in clinical practice for 10 years. And in the first couple of years, you would hear it every once in a while, the microbiome is responsible for XYZ. And it was still a little fringe, but now it's like every week we get our scientific review papers that come through our office, and we see microbiome is responsible for depression. Microbiome is responsible for immune tolerance. Microbiome can affect the way we are susceptible to sickness. I mean, it's nonstop. And I even talked to someone at the FDA the other day, and they're talking a lot about the microbiome now. And someone else that I work with at the USDA, they're talking, so everybody's talking about it. So why is everybody talking about it? Why is there so much interest? Well, hopefully tonight we're going to unravel some of that. But I think we should start off by doing a little bit of overview about what gut health means, what the microbiome is, how it all plays together. So I want to draw your attention to this little graphic here. And what you have is a tube, which is basically from our mouth to the back end of us. Everything that's inside of this tube is still considered the outside of us. Right? So we put food in and it goes through the tube. And at some point, the food goes from the inside of the tube, the intestines, to the inside of us, where it becomes part of us. But there's this regulation on the inside of this tube called the GI barrier. And the GI barrier is super critically important because there is literally one cell between the inside of us and the outside world. So one little cell layer is between our bloodstream and then everything we put down the hatch, or everything we breathe in, and everything we accidentally eat. So it's crucial that that GI barrier, that gut barrier, is as strong as possible. And we need help there. And so that's where these microorganisms come in. So we have our one cell layer thick lining, and then we have a mucus lining that's right on the inside of this. And in this case, mucus is great. I know a lot of us with sinus infections are like, oh, no mucus, but actually we want a boatload of mucus in our digestive tract. It's this protective padding that is between the inside of us and the outside world. Now, how does that mucus layer get there? It comes from the microbiota. So the microbiota is a collection of all these organisms like bacteria, fungi, yeast. And they take all the food stuff that we eat, primarily the fiber stuff, and they ferment it, and they create lots of side products from that. But one of the most important ones is the mucus layer. So just to review, we've got the gut lining, which is one cell thick. Behind the gut lining is our bloodstream. Really important that we only let certain things like nutrients in our bloodstream and not other things like toxins, chemicals, viruses into our immune system. So we've got that one cell layer thick lining, and then we have mucus. And then on top of that, we have these microorganisms. Now, most of this is happening in the colon. We have a little bit of bacteria all over us, on top of our skin, in our nasal cavities. Our oral microbiome is something that dentists are talking a lot about. So there's bacteria everywhere, but there's 10 times more bacteria in our large intestines, in our colon. So here are some things that we know that are crucial and to the microbiome, and why it's so important that we foster a good microbiome. So these bacteria take up nutrients from our food. And, down here it says prevention of malnutrition. That's a little severe, but also, for example, the leafy green vegetables that we take in have a lot of vitamin K1, and vitamin K1's excellent for blood clotting and in keeping it so we don't bleed out. Now, the bacteria that live in the GI lining here are responsible for taking those leafy greens and taking that vitamin K1 and actually converting it into K2. Because K2 isn't well found in the diet. It's only in like Japanese fermented soybean, which tastes like mucus. It's very gross. And there's a little bit in butter and a little bit in dairy, but there's not a lot of it. So primarily we get this K2 from the bacteria that take our leafy greens and synthesize it into K2. And now K2, you're starting to hear a bunch about K2. The big job that K2 does is it tells calcium that we take in from our diet to go to the right places, like our bones, our teeth. If calcium doesn't know where to go due to a lack of K2 in the environment, it can go to our kidneys and cause kidney stones. It can go to our arteries and cause calcifications and plaques. So it's so vitally important that we have the right bacteria in our gut, therefore to prevent things like plaques in the arteries or kidney stones. So that's huge. That's one example of many. Another huge aspect, and this is pertinent to today's world, is that the gut really controls our immune tolerance. It is there, the bacteria is there to help us figure out what is friend, like food, versus what is foe, like virus, or pathogen, like E. coli. When we're very young, our microbiome helps us determine food allergens or prevent food allergens. So people who have a lot of food allergies, or now we're seeing a lot of food sensitivities, tend to have a breakdown in the gut microbiota and barrier. And then immune tolerance also with infections. So we find that people who have lots of diversity, lots of different kinds of bacteria down there, have a better chance of getting through cold and flu seasons without getting sick. And then last but not least, we've heard of the gut-brain axis. Anyone raise your hand if you have. This is something we're starting to hear a lot about, the gut-brain axis. Yeah, so our brain down to our gut connects through this one nerve called the vagal nerve. And it turns out that these little organisms in our gut can communicate to our brain through that nerve. Did you also know that 80% of our serotonin and dopamine is made in our gut lining? So our ability to feel happy and motivated stems from the microbiota, or the colonies of bacteria that live within us. So if you're looking at the scientific literature, you're going to see a huge link now to obesity and diabetes. It turns out that when you have too much of certain colonies of bacteria, you're more prone to absorbing more calories from food. It's pretty crazy, right? It turns out there is an evolutionary gain from that in some people, like say hunter-gatherer societies that don't have access to high caloric foods. If you're hunting and gathering and you're mostly living off berries until you get a big kill, then you need as many calories from your food as possible. So those cultures really develop those bacteria that get more calories out of their food. However, we're starting to see in modernized civilization, people nowadays have this bacteria, and we're not really sure why, but it is part of a trend of what we call dysbiosis, or having too much of the bacteria that's leading to inflammation and obesity, and too little bacteria that's preventing those. So I just told you a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? And that was just like the bird's eye view. That was the overall. That was a general view. If you have a question, you can unmute yourself and holler. Okay. So I think based on that, you can understand that the GI barrier is pretty darn important. And also that having the right colonies of bacteria is important. So how many of you have heard of leaky gut? Intestinal permeability? Yeah, these are things that we're starting to hear a lot more about. And I'm sure everybody here knows somebody with gut issues. It is so common to have something wrong with the gut. And this is a trend that we're seeing in primary care too. Almost everybody I counsel has something going on with their gut. It's rare to hear someone say, nope, I just eat and I don't think about it and I don't have any issues. Very, very rare. So This concept of leaky gut or intestinal permeability can be boiled down to this. If we look back here at the intestines, you start to have little bald spots basically where there's no microbiota and there's no mucus. So really what's left is you have just that one tiny little cell layer between the outside world and the inside of you. And so all of a sudden, all of this becomes compromised. So a leaky gut will have less immune tolerance, meaning the dairy that you ate for breakfast, that yogurt, will go into your stomach, into your intestines, and then sneak through the gut lining and then get into your bloodstream. And now your immune system, which resides in your bloodstream, doesn't know the difference between dairy or bacteria. It just says, you're foreign, I don't like you, I'm going to remember you next time and create an immune reaction when I see you next. So then your body learns that every time that dairy protein comes in, uh-oh, there's that bad stuff again, and you have an immune response. So that's really what a food sensitivity is. Also, when there's bald spots in your intestines, you start to become more susceptible to illness, particularly foodborne illnesses. So, lately we've seen a lot of salmonella in the food supply, and people who are most susceptible to getting that are the people that have a leaky gut. So another thing we're linking to this leaky gut phenomenon is the development of autoimmune disease. Now, autoimmune disease is becoming, unfortunately, more common. About 1 out of 5 people will develop an autoimmune disease in their lifetime. And what autoimmune means is that your body gets confused some way, in some shape and form, and starts attacking its own tissue. So, for example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid where your body mistakes the thyroid gland as an enemy and creates antibodies against the thyroid. And then you have hypothyroidism because of that. So the people who are a lot smarter than me, who are doing all this research into how autoimmune disease develops, actually thinks that leaky gut, or intestinal permeability is like the more scientific name for it, is one of the 3 triggering factors that will precede the development of an autoimmune disease. So I hope I've convinced you through all of this that gut health and keeping a healthy microbiome and being kind to your gut barrier is crucial for everything from your head to your toe, for your mood, for your immune system, for your ability to enjoy all the foods without having sensitivities, and to extract all the proper nutrition from your food so you don't need to live off of supplements. So, yeah, I think I already told you, we're linking GI issue or microbiome issues to non-GI symptoms. So when we talk about gut health, it's not just so we have better bowel movements or so we don't have GERD or reflux. It's so that we're not depressed and so that we're not always sick. And so our skin is radiant. We're starting to see the use of probiotics in psychiatry. They're using probiotics instead of psych meds in some patients with good results. So we've got to think bigger here. Now, let's talk about why these changes are happening to the microbiome, why we're getting more sick, why we have more leaky gut, why we have more autoimmune disease. Our ancestors had about 4,000 different species of organisms in their guts. That's quite a lot. If you look at the modern American, we only have about 1,000. So we have 1/4 the diversity of microorganisms. And just to keep this short and simple, higher diversity, better health outcomes. So the more, you can think about like a garden, the more plants you have growing, the more pollinators come in, the more harvest you get, the more variety you have. It's just a better experience than if you just grow tomatoes and all you get to do is live off of tomatoes. I mean, tomatoes are good, but you want variety. So the way that we are going to increase our diversity in our diet, we will get to that shortly. First, I need to show you how we compromise that diversity. So there's several things that we know for sure affect one, the microbiome, so that means the organisms, and then two, the barrier, that means like the mucus lining that keeps the outside away from the inside. Now, the ones here that we have in the table, these are modifiable for the most part, but I do want to point out that there are some unmodifiable factors that we know influence the microbiome. So, for example, why someone has poor gut health and why someone doesn't have poor gut health might have to do with things that aren't even in their control. Like we know that people who are born via vaginal birth versus C-section are more resilient in terms of immune health, have less allergies. And that's because vaginal births expose the child to the mother's microbiome. There's also the concept of being breastfed or bottle fed. Breast milk has amazing probiotics and prebiotics in it, and that's where the infant gets most of its immune system. The presence of pets or animals, studies on children that grow up on farms show that they have much less atopic disorders. Those are things like allergies, asthma, and eczema. Number of siblings, number of housemates. So the more people, the more pets you're exposed to, the more diverse your gut gets. Age can affect your microbiome, culture, geographic location, and genetics. So not much we can do about those things other than maybe adopt a pet. But let's talk about the things we do have control over. So the microbiome, again, is the bacteria, fungi, yeast. And things that negatively affect them, so throw the balance off, we know, of course, antibiotics. But I want to just point out that having an antibiotic once in a while, like less than once a year, is most likely fine. It's the chronic use. So unfortunately, people with Lyme disease, for example, get put on antibiotics month after month. Some patients use antibiotics for skin disorders, low dose albeit, but they're on them around the clock. Chronic sinusitis, UTIs, these are conditions where patients can get stuck on antibiotics for quite a long time. Alcohol, so I had to put the little caveat, exceeding moderation, because it seems that a little alcohol, so what that means is 1 serving for women, 2 for men, is okay, but more than that causes a change in the bacteria and fungi in yeast. There tends to be more of a yeast dominant situation when we consume more alcohol. And we don't want anything to be dominant. We want balance. Artificial sweeteners, so not say stevia, but sucralose and aspartame sweeten low. In fact, some studies show that the use of that converts bacterial colonies to be more calorically greedy. So that meaning you're going to extract more calories from your food than if you didn't have that bacteria. So those sweeteners can increase our weight, even though they're there in diet drinks. So certainly medications, PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, and those drugs are really only supposed to be short-term drugs, like 2 to 6 weeks at most. But unfortunately, again, patients get stuck on them for very long periods of time. So if you are on them and you've been on them for a long time, it's worth having a conversation with your nutritionist or your primary care provider or GI doctor about strategies to get off of that. Oral contraceptive pills, NSAIDs, chronic use again of NSAIDs, chemotherapy, and steroids can all change the microbiome. Challenges to the barrier. So when your gut barrier, your mucus layer starts to change, the microbiome changes too. Because the microbiome, those bacteria, fungi, yeast, they love to live in mucus. If we don't have enough mucus in there, they are more than likely to not colonize and not live there. So chronic low-grade inflammation. Now, if you're all a part of Crossroads, it's pretty standard of care to get your CRP checked on your blood work. CRP is a marker of inflammation, and it's normal for it to spike up if you have, say, a cold or you just had surgery. If you have acute inflammation, that will go up. However, if you're noticing on your lab work every year your CRP is higher than 1, then that tells us that you have some low-grade inflammation, and over time that is going to start to eat away at the microbiome. So we want to try to get to the root of where that low-grade inflammation is coming from. In terms of diet, I kind of see these three things together as the standard American diet. So excess refined starches, so that would be like potato starch, corn starch, that's in a lot of baked goods, but also white flour is considered a refined starch. Excess sugar, for women, that's anything over 25 grams a day, and for men, that's anything over 36 grams a day. If you start reading labels, you might notice that adds up really fast. And then also excess saturated fat. So if you think about all those three together, it is pretty much like a soda and hamburger meal. Drive-through fast food, right? And that's unfortunately a lot of what Americans are eating. Or it could be a croissant from Dunkin' Donuts with bacon, egg, and cheese on it, because that croissant has the starches and lots of sugar in it still, saturated fat from the bacon and the cheese. Now, if you're eating whole foods and getting saturated fat, I'm less worried about that. It's more so when saturated fat is combined with processed foods with lots of starch and sugar that it becomes an issue. I call that sweet fat. Sugary, starchy fat is the perfect recipe for weight gain, for disease progression, and clearly to affect the microbiome. Infections, okay, well, that's sometimes we can't be in control of traveler's diarrhea, but they can definitely have long-term effects on the microbiome. Another diet piece, low fiber diet. Well, we're going to talk a lot about fiber soon, so I'm just going to skip over that. So this is interesting, over stress or ongoing stress and depression. Remember I was telling you about the nerve that connects the gut and the brain? Well, if you have ongoing stress, which you're feeling sort of, we say here, but it actually is all the way through the body, and it connects to the gut through the vagal nerve. It also reduces blood flow. We know stress reduces blood flow to the gut, and without blood flow to the gut, we can't support that mucus lining. You've heard of fight or flight. There's two parts of our nervous system, right? So we have fight or flight, and then we have rest and digest. You heard digest in one of them. So at any given time, you can't both be in fight or flight and resting and digesting. So if you're a person with chronic stress and you're always in that fight or flight part of your nervous system, then your digestion isn't getting the time it needs or the blood flow it needs to heal and maintain all of that energy that goes into the jobs that it does. And I just added this one yesterday because this is kind of new research here. So overeating and or constantly grazing seems to be an issue versus fasting. Fasting between meals, I should be more specific, or fasting overnight 12 hours. It turns out that little bits of fasting, so not like 3-day fast, but just fasting, say from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., or fasting between breakfast and lunch, between lunch and dinner. But most people, they're not doing that. There's more of a graze, right? So if you're fasting more often, a little bit of that can really increase some really important strains of bacteria, particularly one called Akkermansia. And you might start hearing about that one soon, because Akkermansia seems to be the ticket for making immunotherapy for cancer work. There's this whole new treatment for cancer in the past 10, 15 years where basically people's bodies are being trained to kill the cancer itself. But it seems like the people that don't have this bacteria called Akkermansia, they don't do well on that treatment. It just doesn't work for them. But the people that end up kicking the cancer's butt with their own cells are the ones that have lots of Akkermansia. So there's a dietary mechanism we can tap into to increase Akkermansia, but just not eating can also increase it. So not eating from, let's say, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. is something that everyone should strive to do if that works for your schedule. And then really trying to fast in between meals. Someone give me a question. I'm just sick of my voice. You're all still there?
I have a question.
Great.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm. Please.
About this fasting? I have no problem the night to morning, but because I'm supposed to not eat big meals and always tiny little meals, I'm told
Oh.
to eat little all day long. So that's bad then. I'm
Well,
not sure
it's
how.
not, no, it's not so bad because you're still going to get the fasting overnight. You
So
don't
it's
have to do
okay.
both. Yeah.
Okay, so as long as I over 12 hours at night, that's fine.
That's fine. Yes. Yes. Where I really encourage eating in windows, like just breakfast, lunch, and dinner, are people that have high blood sugar or a lot of weight to lose.
Mhm.
So, but I don't think that's you. So I think what you're doing is perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else want to throw anything in there? Ask a question before I move on? All right.
Can you spell acromantia?
Yes, I'm going to have to write it in here. Akkermansia. Akkermansia. All right, so changes to the GI barrier. So remember, that is like the mucousy barrier that's between the living probiotics and that one cell layer thick inside of us. So that barrier, there are several things we know that are going to make that barrier not robust. And in terms of diet, there's a couple things. So we see deficiencies in vitamin A, D, and zinc, as well as a too low of a protein diet, really affecting the gut lining. We again see alcohol here, certain medications, specifically NSAIDs. Back and forth here. So challenges to the microbiome affect the GI barrier, and we also know challenges to the GI barrier are affected by changes to the micro. So it, you know, when one changes, it changes the other two. They live in symbiosis. So severe malnutrition, like in cancer or intensive care, elderly people, but athletes, even young, vibrant athletes can be malnourished because their exercise is just so intense. They deplete a lot of their nutrition. People with gluten sensitivity and celiac disease can have more challenges to the barrier because wheat is a protein that can actually attack that gut barrier lining. Fructose, excess fructose. So I'm not talking necessarily about fructose in fruit. That's the primary sugar in fruit. Not that, but fructose that's found in beverages like sodas. Excess saturated fat. So again, fructose and saturated fat. There's your big slurpy drink with your cheeseburger, bacon cheeseburger. Infections. Yeah, we can't really do a lot about that. This is interesting. Both under exercising, being sedentary, and over exercising, like being a triathlete, changes the barrier in negative ways. So there's that happy medium that we all want to strive for, which is moving the body every day, not necessarily being in a gym every day, but not sitting on your butt all day. And occasionally getting the heart rate up, and more frequently lifting heavier things. You know, I'm really trying to get my patients these days, if they have limited time, to focus on strength training. Forget about, you know, the jogging and, you know, the cardio, because if you lift heavy things, it doesn't have to be 100 pounds, but if it's heavy to you, your heart rate gets up. And I think you get more bang for your buck there. Again, the stress and depression, same way that it affects the microbiome. Okay, let's get rid of that. So that's a lot of stuff we have to keep in mind, but it's not stuff you haven't heard before, right? Nothing is coming out of the blue like, oh no, I didn't know that. So hopefully it's just more encouragement to work on lifestyle stuff. I'll talk about where the research is going with the microbiome later. All right, so I try to put together in as simple terms as possible the general guidelines on how to go about supporting your gut. And again, I don't think you're going to see things in here that you're shocked, like you've never heard before, But maybe it'll just help you focus in on the crucial pieces to what a good diet is versus trying to do all the things you've heard all over the internet about diet. Maybe we just focus on these, because if we know our gut is healthy, we know everything is going to fall in line. So the number one thing is what we just went over, just being aware of what is bad for the microbiome and GI barrier and doing your best to avoid those factors. Two would be being aware of the vitamin A rich foods. We know that's a big piece of maintaining the gut barrier. So every day trying to eat something orange or yellow. And then weekly trying to get in pastured eggs and 100% grass-fed animal meats and liver. Because there's two forms of vitamin A. There's the plant form and there's the animal form. Now in humans, we're animals, and so we need the animal form. And most of us can take the plant form, like eat a carrot, and convert it internally into the animal form that we need, but some of us can't. And so that's why I put a plug in for both animal and plant, just in case you're that small percentage of people that can't convert the carrot into vitamin A. Regular sources of omega-3s, whether that's going to be from fatty fish or chia flax and walnuts. Now here, I told you there's something you can do with your diet to increase that acromantia, consuming organic red-skinned fruits regularly. So it turns out that acromantia loves red skin. Who knew? So red skin apples, red grapes, any red berries, pomegranates. You can even do a little bit of pomegranate juice every day if you don't want to get into a pomegranate, because they can be a little messy. Or recently I purchased pomegranate powder from Sprouts, and I just put a teaspoon or so of that into like water or a smoothie. So really an apple a day keeps the doctor away and keeps the microbiome happy. Vitamin D. So in Maryland, we just don't get enough from the sun, and our diet certainly doesn't provide enough. And just from counseling patients, reading labs with the doctors, I can tell you that about 5,000 IUs a day seems to be the sweet spot for us Marylanders to get our levels to a good place. But I definitely encourage getting your levels checked regularly, and then you can fine tune your intake. But that is one supplement no one should be slacking on. There's just so much data right now. There was leading before COVID was a thing about how vitamin D helped prevent cancer, how it prevents bone loss. But we know the most severe cases of COVID are associated with the lowest levels of vitamin D. All right, so now getting a little bit more granular with the diet. So of course we know to eliminate or severely limit processed foods. There's really nothing good about them. But my little trick is how do I know if a food is too processed? Because I eat things out of packages sometimes. You have to. But my red flag, my like hard stop, not going to buy this is if the food includes vegetable oils in the ingredient. So if there's corn oil, soy oil, canola, sunflower, safflower, cottonseed, that's a no-no for me. Or if there's artificial dyes, like if you see red dye number 40 or blue lake number whatever. Or you could always go with what the great food writer Michael Pollan says is, don't eat anything you don't recognize as food. So if you're reading those ingredients and you're like, well, I don't have that in my kitchen, that sounds like a 10-syllable chemical, that's a red flag for an overly processed food. So I want to take a minute to talk about pesticides. I'm going to pull up some information here. So it turns out that there are some foods that when they get to the grocery store, they have very high levels of pesticides still on them. And if you haven't heard about this yet, it's called the Dirty Dozen. So let me pop up my Google here. Okay, so Dirty Dozen is a list that's generated by the Environmental Working Group, and it comes out every year in about February. So this is the 2020 guide, and what they're showing us here is the foods at the grocery store that have the highest levels of pesticides on them. Now, why is pesticides an issue other than what it sounds like, not so good? well, it turns out pesticides kill things like bacteria and microorganisms, right? They're there to kill the pests. They're there to kill the things that are competing with our food supply when they're growing on a large scale. So if we're eating these pesticides, guess what? They're killing our microbiome slowly. In small amounts, albeit, but if we're eating strawberries every single day and spinach every single day and it's not organic, then these little bits add up over time. So the way I think about what foods I need to buy organic is I just follow this list. So I'm going to always buy these 12 foods as organic and not worry about the rest. There's also something called the Clean 15, which these have hardly any pesticide residue left on them. So that's good to know. I didn't know cauliflower was on there until I checked this out. And I've been buying organic cauliflower. And yes, while nutrients may be a little bit higher, sometimes organic cauliflower is $3 more a head. So if you're looking to save on your budget, this is a way to just focus on what's important. And the other thing that I think is important that we're not talking enough about is the pervasive use of Roundup in our grains and even beans now. So Roundup, or the chemical name is called glyphosate, and it's used commonly to get grains ready for processing. So when a field is ready to harvest, they'll spray with glyphosate, and it basically kills them faster so they can get them to dry faster and then get them to processing faster. But it turns out that a lot of this glyphosate is still left on the products once it gets into the grocery store. And it's in very high amounts in certain things like oats. So this is from the Environmental Working Group. A couple of years ago, they pulled conventional and organic oats off the shelves just to test their levels of glyphosate. They found that most of the conventional had glyphosate, and a little bit of the organic even did too, probably from neighboring fields, I would expect. But then they established their benchmark. So they say if there's less than 160 parts per billion glyphosate, it's probably okay. We don't know for sure, but they think we should shoot for that. So out of the 43 conventional, 31 had more than that benchmark, where at least 0 of the organic did. Now let's look at the nitty gritty. So here's some brands. So if anyone has a brand of oats that they eat, let me know. I can look at it for you. But they looked at granolas, instant oats, oat breakfast cereal, snack bars, and whole oats. So this one is crazy. Quaker old-fashioned oats in one sample had 390. Now remember, the benchmark's 160. Another sample, 1,100. Another sample, 1,300. That is frightening.
So what about, I'm sorry, can I
Yeah,
ask something?
please.
So what about Bob's Red Meal oat? I use that a lot in the soup.
Yeah, so we've got Bob's Red Mill Steel Cut Oat here, 301 sample, and the other sample none detected. So it's a crapshoot, basically. But here's Bob's Red Mill Old Fashioned Rolled Oats, 4 samples tested. In 1 none detected, 110, 120, 120. So my takeaway is organic is probably your best bet. But still, there's still some, but at least it's way under that benchmark. Some of this is really scary though, like Cheerios, whole grain oats, 490, 470, 530. So I have more good news for you. Recently, they looked also at legumes. So EWG hummus, let's check that one out. They did an audit of hummus, right? Environmental Working Group again. And they used the same benchmark, 160 parts per billion was the okay cutoff. So here's some of the products that they tested. Again, they did some conventional and they did some organic. This is a little frightening. So in original hummus, Whole Foods brand conventional, 2,379 parts per billion. That's pretty wild. And then, you know, you can just go down the list. So it's in descending order. So some of the best stuff would be at the bottom. Cedars organic hummus, Whole Foods organic hummus. So organic's probably better for beans, but look, even conventional, it says none detected. So crapshoot, but I'm going to err on the side of caution and go for organic when it comes to beans and grains. So a university in Finland the other day came out with a study where they exposed bacteria from the microbiome to glyphosate, and they found that it killed off about 80% of the bacteria that reside in a human's microbiome. So that's pretty alarming. That's the first time we've seen a study that directly shows the effect of glyphosate on our microbiome. I know, I'm full of good news tonight. Well, let's talk a little bit about good things. So after we avoid some things, we want to start adding good things.
That's a good question.
Please, yes.
Dawn, are they behind a lock? They're locked. We have to have accounts to see what you just loaded.
I'm sorry, you got cut off a little bit in the beginning of that. Can you repeat that question?
Do we have to have an account to look at the website that you just looked at?
Oh, no, that's all free information. Environmental Working Group, just Google that, and then either hummus or oats, and that'll be one of the first things that comes up.
Thank you.
Also, yeah, I want to just point out, since we're talking about them, they have a lot of great information on their website. They have what's called a healthy living database. It's also an app, and you can download this, and you can scan the barcodes of foods in the grocery store, and it gives you their take on how a rating of 1 to 10. I think 1 is actually good for them, 10 is bad. Based on how much the food is processed, the potential concern of glyphosate, and a couple other things. And so if you find yourself a confused consumer, that's a really good place to start. Just use that app in the grocery store, just scan. They also have a scanner for personal body care products. Because a lot of the things we put on our skin, it's like eating them, right? They're gonna go through our skin and into our bloodstream. So I always kind of think about, like, if what I put on my skin, if I wouldn't eat it, then I probably shouldn't put it on my skin. Okay, so probiotics and prebiotics. Probiotics, for anyone who doesn't know the term, is living bacteria. So a lot of what we've been talking about with the microbiome, probiotics are more of that stuff that we can put inside of us. And they're mostly found in things like coconut water kefir, dairy kefir, kombucha, apple cider vinegar, that's raw, sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles. Those are, some of the biggest ones. Yogurt, I didn't put that in there. But then we have what's called prebiotics, and they're just starting to get their time in the limelight. And I think it's about time we talk more about them, because prebiotics are fibers that we consume that feed the organisms in our body so that they're happy and they stay there. We want as much as possible to grow good bacteria in our body and keep them there for good. So prebiotics make them happy. That's like they're essentially their favorite diet. So what we eat feeds our microbiome ideally. So how do we do that? Okay, well, we definitely want to eat more whole plants for fiber instead of refined grains, fiber bars like Fiber One, or Metamucil type powders. Because if you just every day take, let's say, Metamucil, that is just one type of fiber. And that one type of fiber is probably only going to feed one type of bacteria. And remember I was saying we have about 1,000 species down there. So the benefit to fiber is getting it from whole foods, because if you have sunchokes, like one of the things I want to talk to you about tonight, sunchokes have several different types of fibers in there. And of course, they have lots of phytochemicals, like thousands of phytochemicals in there that might also have these effects on the microbiome. So when you eat whole foods, the sky's the limit in terms of the benefit. And also fiber bars these days are heavily processed. They add sugars and inflammatory oils and some, just unwanted ingredients. And then refined grains. You have a question?
I do. Is that okay?
Yes.
About fiber, as you know, I cannot eat raw fruits, raw vegetables, and everything with fiber. So how do I do that?
So there are some people that cannot take in some fiber, most fiber, really. And I would say that this talk is probably geared towards the people who can take in the fiber, but it doesn't mean you can't get the benefit from some of these foods. It just has to be done in a safe way, meaning very small amounts of some of these foods. So if you think about the size of bacteria, they are microscopic, right? So even if we take our finger and we dip it into a fiber, whatever that is, put it on our tongue and swallow it, that's a lot of fiber for those little bacteria. So you don't have to think about quantity for a human, you want to think about quantity for a bacteria. So if you can't deal with fiber, it's okay. You can have small amounts of things that are less fibery, but still will have the benefit of the microbiome. And you and I should talk outside of this class about how to make that work for you. Okay. All right. I think, I didn't tell you this yet. So there was a pretty large study recently that looked at diversity in terms of our diet. Like, what are we eating every week? What's our variety like? And it turns out most Americans only eat about 10 species of plants a week. And the American diet really has been boiled down to only 12 species of plants and animals versus thousands of species from when we were hunters and gatherers. So we went from eating a huge diverse diet, species-wise, into just this narrow amount of foods. And when we only get 12 different species, we're only getting what's in those 12 foods. So the studies found that people who were able to get 30 species of plants per week had the highest diversity in their gut. So we don't even need 1,000. We just need 30 species of plants per week. And so maybe it's because I'm a nutritionist and I'm a little nerdy, but I think it's fun to count your species. So that could be like a task for you guys. You could start to write down the different fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, herbs, and spices over the course of a week and count how many you have. Is there a question?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? On number 10, you're talking about having rice and potatoes and beans after they've been cooked and cooled.
Yeah.
What about beans that you buy in a can?
Yep,
they've been
that
cooked
works.
and they've been canned. Are those good? Are those better than, are those still good?
Those are great. Yep.
Canned
Absolutely.
beans are good.
Yep. Yeah, the only thing I would look for with canned beans is to get a can that it says BPA free. Or there's now beans that are in jars, glass jars, which is kind of neat. Because I just worry about the lining of cans. There's this chemical called BPA that seems to be associated with a lot of negative health outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so plant diversity as much as you can. So I've given you a couple things in here. Basically ways to swap out foods that are not very diverse for more diverse foods, like using zucchini noodles or spaghetti squash for pasta, or turning frozen banana into a banana ice cream, using dates or berries for candy, things like that. Okay, and then we'll finish up by talking about these resistant starches. And this is something new in the past 5 years. We didn't know about this before. And this is cool for those of us watching our carbs, watching our weight, for example. So in some foods, when you cook it and then you allow it to cool down and then you eat it the next day, so not eating it freshly cooked, but eating it as leftovers, there's about up to 50% less carbohydrates in it available to turn into blood sugar and potentially fat. However, that 50% that's not there, it goes to our microbiome and it feeds our good guys. So basically what I suggest is when it comes to potatoes, rice, beans, grains, pasta, is cook them, but then eat them tomorrow. So it's good for meal preppers, right?
But you can still heat them up, right?
You can. Some you can still heat up and still get this effect, but it's even more effect if you don't heat it up. So what I would recommend like is potato salad, right? Because that's delicious cold. And then beans, cold bean salads are good. And like a pasta, like salad, pasta salad is cold.
Mhm.
So do both, you know, enjoy your hot foods, but then also have them cold sometimes and know you'll get even more bang for your buck. So there's other resistant starches that don't need to be cooked. And so that would be green bananas. So before your bananas get ripe, eat them. Or if you don't really like the flavor, then you can put them in a smoothie. I feel like they're more tolerable green in a smoothie. They give it that thickness and good texture. And then oats. So in a little bit, I'm going to talk to you about how you can use raw oats and be okay digestively. So all this to say, there are some things you should know, and that is to go low and slow if these foods are new to you. Because like I was saying with the Zeta, our bacteria is very small, and so it doesn't need a lot. So if we try to eat a couple cups of sauerkraut and a couple cups of beans, that is a lot for them to process, and they're going to be going to town on it, and you are going to be gassy, you're going to be bloated, you're going to be cursing my name. So I just have to say, go slow if these are new to you. And what slow to me means is a couple teaspoons for a week or two, and then maybe increase it to a couple tablespoons, and then go from there. It's normal to get a little gassy, and it's normal to get a little bloated. That's actually a good sign. And, you know, that means your bacteria is responding. It's fermenting the foods, and it's creating that mucus layer that we really want it to do. But you don't want to be doubled over in pain. You shouldn't have huge changes in your digestion. Maybe your bowel movements get a little bit more regular and easier to pass. That's good, but you shouldn't be having diarrhea or pain. So I kind of alluded to this. If you cannot tolerate any amount of prebiotic, probiotic, you might need to address underlying conditions. Some people have more of the bad stuff growing, and you need to address that with a healthcare practitioner to sort of like weed whack or pull the weeds. You know, if you're growing a beautiful garden, there's always weeds there, right? And sometimes you just need to get in there, pull the weeds up for the rest to flourish. And there are stool tests now that can help us get more specific about that. One of them I like is called GI Map. So it's a test that if your doctor orders it, or if I order it, we ship it to your house, you send the stool sample to the lab, and they're able to look for pathogens, infections, and then they look at your normal stuff, your normal flora. Do you have enough of the good stuff? They look for akkermansia, for example. So it gives you a good idea of where you're at and where you should be focusing with your diet. All right, so now let's get a lot more specific about prebiotics. Now, if you want to start this tomorrow, this is what you can start with. You can pick any food from the next couple of pages and just start to incorporate this. Luckily, a lot of these things you don't really need recipes for. They're just foods that maybe you haven't tried yet that you can just eat. But I'll teach you a little bit about how I like to use them. Let me pull up Google again, because I want to show you a picture of a jicama. So it is pronounced jicama, even though it has a J. Let's do this here. Okay, so jicama is almost like a potato, but it's very low in starch. So for those of you watching your carbohydrates or looking to lose weight, or you have diabetes, this is a really good root vegetable to have. And what's cool about it is you can eat it raw, like this person just cut it up into sticks, put some chili on there and lime. It tastes a little bit like a savory apple. There's a tiny bit of sweetness, but it's nice and crunchy. And Trader Joe's, as you can see on your handout, has jicama sticks. So they're great for like hummus, guacamole, dippables. But also you can do jicama taco shells. Now Trader Joe's is also selling this one. They sell them already cut for you like this, and then you can just make them into taco shells. So it's a nice low carb, high prebiotic taco shell. Okay, we already talked about the cooked and cooled rice and beans. So remember, any canned beans have already been cooked and cooled. So that means refried beans, hummus, bean soups, marinated bean salads, that all fits the bill. And then think about sushi, that's leftover rice, so that's not a bad idea. And then adding like some cold rice tossed into your salad, if you are a person who doesn't like just salad, you want some more carbohydrate, that's a good way to get it in there. So the raw organic oats, they're kind of hard to digest if you just eat raw oats. So you don't really want to do that. What you want to do is give them a little bit of a chance to soak in a liquid. So overnight oats is something that has been well received by a lot of my patients. And that's the concept. They make it look all pretty online, don't they? So the concept where you would take your oats, your raw oats, at night, mix it with a little bit of liquid and then any accoutrement and let it sit in your refrigerator. Next morning, it's nice and soft and you can eat it. So it's more digestible and you're getting all that prebiotic fiber. You could also soak oats and then put a couple tablespoons in a smoothie that you're going to blend up. So you don't have to add any flavor. You can put the raw oats naked into your smoothie. Kefir. So I was saying before that there's coconut water kefir. Here's a picture of a brand you can find in health food markets. And this isn't meant to drink by the glass. It's actually just, you want to take like a tablespoon at a time. So I wrote an idea in here, mix a tablespoon in sparkling water as a mocktail. Or you could put a little bit of that into a smoothie. Or you can even put it in a salad dressing as the vinegar substitute. But then you have the dairy-based kefir, which is going to be very liquidy. It's like yogurt in flavor, but it's very liquidy. So I think about using dairy kefir as, like if I was gonna have some kind of granola, I could pour that on top, or I could put that in a smoothie, or you could literally just sip on it. So this is a new thing you're starting to see now, cassava flour. Cassava, if we look at what it is a root vegetable. There it is. So it's similar to, say, sweet potatoes and potatoes, where when you cook it and then cool it, it turns into this resistant starch. So nowadays you can buy all of these cassava flour products, like for example, flour tortillas and chips. They're called grain-free usually. That they'll say grain-free, like this says grain-free tortillas. Also, you can buy just straight up cassava flour and search recipes online for cassava flour muffins, breads, cookies, or other flour-based foods. So it's naturally gluten-free and it's, of course, grain-free. All right, we already talked about the green bananas. This is one of my favorites, this sweet potato toast. This is an idea where you take sweet potatoes and cut them into either rounds or long pieces. You cook them, and then you can put them in your refrigerator to use all week, or you can freeze them. And when you're ready, you pop them in the toaster to warm up and then put your topping of choice on there. So for those of you who paid for the food option, you've got 4 slices of sweet potato toast in there, and sky's the limit. You can really, top it. This is like a tuna salad with pickled onion and avocado and almond butter and banana. So
can I ask something?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about people that paid for food option. So
yeah.
Does that include the insurance thing?
Yep, if you're going through insurance, you automatically get food. If you're not going through insurance, there's 2 options. You can pay extra for food or just pay for the stream and the recipes.
And if I were to want to pick that up, would they bring it to the car or do I have to come in?
Oh, no, we can do curbside for you.
Oh, great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So if we have a little time, we go to 6:30, so I can show you how to cut this. And that's really just the big learning curve with making sweet potato toast is how do you cut it into these perfect little slices? Okay, this is my favorite prebiotic for sure. I just love these sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes. And maybe it's because I can't always have access to them. They're not always around. They're definitely around in the fall and the winter. So right now you can get them I got some at Whole Foods today. Mom's Organic Market has them, and sometimes farmers markets have them too. And these are just little delicious potato-like tubers. You can see they look a little bit like ginger or potato. And they're also pretty low in starch, kind of like the jicama I talked to you about. So again, if you're watching carbs, they're a good potato substitute. They're also really packed with iron and potassium. Now, I gotta tell you something a little funny. The nickname for this guy is called fart choke. So I think you can imagine what happens if you eat too much of them. So go slow, go low. For those of you who paid for the food, you are getting some roasted sunchokes. So maybe eat one tomorrow, and if you do well with them, eat the rest the next day. Raw is a really good way to get the most benefit from it in terms of the microbiome support, but I just prefer them cooked. They just taste so sweet and delicious cooked. So I'm going to give you a raw one so you can just slice it and see what it tastes like raw. And then you're going to eat the ones that I roasted for you earlier today. Raw dandelion greens. So in the spring, if you're not spraying your yard with glyphosate, then go ahead and take a little snack out of the yard, or the grocery store sell them too. The thing about them is they are bitter, bitter, bitter. So bitter is amazing for the microbiome though. It turns out the microbiome takes bitter compounds and makes amazing byproducts with them that lower blood sugar levels. So if you have high blood sugar or diabetic, you should be eating as much bitter as you can tolerate. And tolerate is a funny word. You get used to it after a while. Your tolerance definitely goes up. So I would start with just taking 1 or 2 leaves out of a whole pile of these and thinly slicing them and tossing them into a big salad so that you're not getting huge mouthfuls of dandelion. It's just a little bit here and there. Raw asparagus. So it's not the first thing we think about with asparagus. We don't think, oh, I'm going to eat it raw. However, that's where you get the best microbiome bang for your buck. So what I like to do is shave the asparagus with a veggie peeler, and I make ribbons with it, and then I toss that with a lemony vinaigrette. Those of you that bought the food, you're going to get a salad of shaved asparagus, and there's a lemon olive oil vinaigrette, little shallots, which leads us into our next here. So cooked or raw onions, you could go either way here, are an amazing source of prebiotics. And nowadays, we should be getting more onions because they're very high in quercetin, which we think is protective against COVID, or at least reducing the severity of infection, and then vitamin C. So they're a really, really good immune food. Now, raw onions, I don't like raw onions. I know some people do, and that's great. But if you don't, then my method to get them in my body raw more pleasurably is to actually soak them in vinegar. So I have a recipe in here for marinated onions or pickled onions. And those of you that bought the food option, you'll get some of those to play with. And they're really good that way.
And
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I have a question. Is there a difference between the sweet onions and regular onions?
How about red onions?
And red onions?
In terms of the prebiotics, no, they're all going to get you the prebiotics. But in terms of nutrients, the red onions or purple have maybe 4 times more nutrients in them than just the yellow or the Vidalias. So I like to incorporate Vidalias for sweetness, but then I'll put some red onion in there because I know they're more high in the nutrient profile.
And onions aren't bad for leaky gut.
No, onions are very, very, very good for the gut. Okay, so cooked artichokes. So I'm a big fan of taking an artichoke and steaming it and then eating it. Let me show you if you're not familiar. It's a little bit of work, but I'll do multiple at a time. So I'll take an artichoke, put them in my Instant Pot, so it looks just like this, maybe 3 of them, and steam them and then refrigerate them. So before dinner, what I'll do is make like a little vinaigrette, like just lemon and olive oil and garlic maybe, and then take the leaves off and eat the meat. Actually, it looks more like this, right? You're biting the meaty part off the leaf and discarding the rest of that. And then once you get to the center, then in the center is more like the artichoke heart that you're used to seeing in a can or a jar. Yeah, so the leaves come from here, and if you steam them, you can eat those. And then the center is the heart. But if you don't want to fuss with all that, then you can just have jarred artichoke hearts on hand. And I love to add those into salads. It's more to sink your teeth into than say like carrots or celery. It just has a better, more meaty texture. Okay, raw garlic. That one's an easy one to get in because it's in a lot of dips, right? Like hummus, which you guys are getting in your food kit, pico de gallo guacamole. So if you like Latin or Mexican, there's lots of garlic in there. White bean dip. Also think about salad dressings. If you're making your own salad dressing, you can grate up a little garlic and add that. And really it's the raw garlic that gets you the prebiotic fiber. So if you cook it, it may still be good for other things, but you're not getting the gut effect. So kombucha, it's not for everyone. Kombucha is a beverage that tastes a little bit vinegary. So if you don't like to sip on vinegar as a drink, then you can use kombucha as a salad dressing, and that's actually a fun way to use it. So whatever salad dressing you're using, it when it calls for the vinegar, you can use kombucha and see how that goes. You just want to look out for the sugar content. Usually there's 2 servings in a bottle. So if it says 8 grams of sugar per serving, that's really 16 grams per bottle. So you want to look for the ones that have the least amount of sugar in grams. Okay, this market here has really exploded in the past 10 years. There's so many fun sauerkrauts, kimchis, pickles. I mean, before it was just like boar's head sauerkraut, right? And that's not even a good one. But now we have all these fun ones like wild brine. If anyone goes to Costco, you can get this nice big thing of wild brine sauerkraut. Or if you go to Safeway Giant, Harris Teeter, Wegmans, Bubby's is everywhere now. And then Sprouts has some of these as well. So these foods are very acidic, they're tart. And so you want to add these to maybe a meal that lends well to acidity or tartness. Like think about potato salad. There's kind of like usually a relish in there, right? Tuna salad, egg salad. Adding these into those kind of salads is great. If you do a potato salad, you get the benefit of the resistant starch from the potatoes we talked about, plus the probiotics. So that's a win-win. Now, one thing I just want to show you is how to actually tell if it's a real living product. So the first thing is that if it's refrigerated. So if it's refrigerated, it's raw and it's got living bacteria. So if you see a sauerkraut or kimchi and it's on the shelf and it's not refrigerated, or a pickle like Vlasik's pickle, then that is not fermented. It just has vinegar in it. So let's look at the back of Vlasik pickle or the ingredients. I don't know that this is actually what we're looking for. Let's see, here we go. All right, so here's Vlasic pickle. So the ingredients in this pickle is cucumber, water, distilled vinegar, salt, calcium, yellow dye. Well, so I wouldn't buy that because of the dye in it, right? I was telling you that was one of my red flags. But when we're talking about fermentation does not require any vinegar. So if your pickle or sauerkraut has vinegar in the first 3 ingredients, they added that vinegar to just the food to make it taste like it's fermented, but it's not. A true ferment, we can look at Bubby's, for example, and see what their ingredients are. So here's their dill pickles, and that's really hard to see. Okay, let me try. Cucumbers. Well, I can't see it. Let's see if this one opens. Here we go. All right, here we go. So this bread and butter has cucumber, water, cane sugar, white vinegar. So this one is actually not fermented. So we're gonna look for their other one. They're just straight up pickle. Bread and butter tend to be like the sweeter ones. Here we go, kosher dough. So usually there's cane sugar and bread and butter. All right, so just straight up Bubby's Pickles says cucumber, water, salt, garlic, dill, spices, mustard, calcium. All right, the absence of vinegar means we've got a true pickle on our hands. So what happens then is that the salt that's added to the cucumber interacts with the bacteria that's naturally present on the surface of that cucumber. The bacteria eats the salt and it produces lactic acid, which tastes like vinegar. And the bacteria love that environment, so they reproduce. So you've got this, it's very cloudy, you know, that's pretty typical with ferments. So you've got all this bacteria living in here because they added salt to the vegetable. Versus if you had cucumber and you just added vinegar, there'd be no bacteria left, but it would taste vinegary. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys and you know how to pick out a ferment now. So I've included in your meal kit, if you got one, a beet, cabbage, and a beet, cabbage, I forgot what else is in it, but it's a red kraut that you can try. And last but not least, here's a beverage that is pretty delicious, especially at night. So this is a caffeine-free beverage that tastes a little bit like coffee, and it's made with chicory root and dandelion root, which aren't as bitter as the dandelion leaf. And if you get the caffeine-free ones, you can drink it day and night. If you like caffeine, there's New Orleans-based coffee or New Orleans style coffee. And what they do is they put chicory into the coffee bean. So that's a good way to get your prebiotics in with your morning cup of joe. So is your head spinning yet? We made it through most of the prebiotics in the diet. Okay, so I've got a couple recipes that I've written down for you. Some of the things that required a little bit more putting together than just, say, adding it to a salad. So pickled onions, roasted sunchokes, sweet potato toast, a smoothie that includes red berries for your akromansia, green banana for your prebiotic, and your choice of either coconut water kefir, dairy kefir, yogurt for more probiotics, and a little bit of the overnight soaked oats. So that's a really good gut smoothie. And then last, we talked about the asparagus salad.
If I wanted to make that smoothie, can I leave the oat out? Would it be good?
Yeah, there's multiple sources of prebiotics in here. So you could take one out and you would still get great benefit.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, you guys. So I'm going to go move over to the kitchen so that you can see me cut up a couple of things. So if anyone needs to take a bathroom break, now's the time to do it. I'm going to move my operation over there and I'll be right back, okay? Okay, can you guys see me?
No.
No? Oh, my camera's not on, that's why.
There you go.
All right, here we go.
I have one more question. Can you replace chia seed with flaxseed?
Yeah, you can. That would be fine.
You don't get enough benefit out of that?
No, you do. You do. I just don't like the taste of flaxseed. That's why I was hesitant, but it's great for you.
The reason I said that is because the flaxseed I can get in powder, but I don't know if you can get chia seed in powder.
You can. It's not as common though. You don't see it often. See, the thing about chia seed is you don't have to grind it up. Are you guys hearing feedback in here?
Hearing very little.
I think I know. I'll be right back. Sorry. Okay, that should work now. Okay, so with chia seed, you don't have to grind it up to get the benefit. Unlike flax, you really do need to grind flax to be able to absorb it and get the benefit.
No, the reason for ground is because of me, because of my digestive.
Oh, I see.
That's why. I was saying you can't get chia seed in ground, but you can get flaxseed in ground. That's why I want to replace.
Gotcha. Yep, but they do sell it. You might have to order it online though.
I see.
All
I
right.
have a quick question,
Yeah.
and you might not be able to answer it. I have been baking my own bread, and I throw in chia seeds. Do I destroy the nutrition of the chia seeds because I've cooked it?
No, because you bake that bread at like 325, 350.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great addition. Add some fiber and some protein.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So I just wanted to give you a little tutorial about some of the cutting techniques that are in your recipes. The first thing I want to suggest is my little trick. When you have a cutting board on your surface, your kitchen surface, it's a good idea to take a wet paper towel and put that down below your cutting board, because without it, things are just slipping around. But once you do that, you anchor your cutting board and it's really hard to move it. And that's going to be crucial for the sweet potato toast. So with the sweet potato toast, I'll show you 2 ways to cut into it. The first thing you want to do, of course, is clean it. I don't bother taking the skin off just because there's extra fiber in there, and this is organic, so I feel really good about eating the whole thing. So the first thing you can do is cut off your ends, just a little bit from each end. Now on the internet, they'll tell you to just start cutting toast into it, but what I don't like about it is this. This is just rolling all over the place, and it's really, really dangerous for you. So if you want to cut long pieces here, what you have to do is just take your knife and take the very smallest piece off of the side, like the wide side, so you have this now flat surface. So now there's no rolling, it's pretty stable, okay? So now you can take your knife and safely start making long cuts. Okay, you just kind of keep doing that. And you're looking for maybe like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick. You want something that when you cook, it's going to still hold up and not get all floppy on you. So that's one way. You can just keep doing that. But as you get close to the edge, it gets a little scary. So another way, pretend I still had all this on here. So you could take a big sweet potato, and after you cut the ends off, you can cut it right down the center. And then you have this surface area now, which is much bigger. So you have more of an anchor that you're working with. And then you can cut your toast. Mm-hmm. The last piece is always the hardest. So if it feels a little wobbly, just make sure the bottom is cut straight. Okay, that feels better to me. So then just you know, pick where you're going to put your knife down, move this hand, and then go downwards. You want to rock a little bit. Okay, and then you can do that with your other side too. So that's probably the safest way, is you have the big sweet potato and you cut it in half, and then you work on each half. These are still perfect for toast. You know, it's like a 4-bite toast instead of an 8-bite toast, but it works.
What kind of knife is best for that?
Something like a chef's knife. That, not a serrated knife. You don't want any serrated. You just want like a flat chef's knife. Okay, so the great thing about sweet potato toast is you don't need to put any oil, salt, pepper, seasoning. This stuff just goes on a parchment-lined baking sheet, and you will cook it in the oven until it's slightly soft, but you don't want it floppy. So you just, you know, stay around the kitchen. Don't go watch TV and forget about it. So those of you that are picking up the food, you have 4 slices to play with. I've given you some hummus that you can put on one, and the other 3 you can put whatever you want on them. To warm them up, you can pop them in the toaster oven, or you can put them in the just under the broiler. The other recipe calls for shaved asparagus, so I wanted to show you how I shave asparagus. I'm just gonna pop one more 2 lights on. It's getting a little dark in here. Hopefully it's a little bit brighter now. So for this salad, or if you're shaving any asparagus, you want to get the thickest asparagus possible. That way you can get a lot of shaves off of it. So here, let me move you closer. All right, now I'm going to leave the part on the bottom that we usually snap off, because this is where I'm going to hold the asparagus. And then I've got my peeler here, and then I'm going to put my peeler on the asparagus and just start to move in this direction. So what's coming off of it is these great little ribbons of asparagus. And you just keep going, and you want to keep your peeler as perpendicular to the cutting board as possible. And then at some point you can't get any more off, so then you can just snap wherever it snaps naturally. And I know this isn't as thin, but it's fine. So that's going to go into your salad. So again, you hold it where you would normally pull this, snap this piece off, and just shave. So I shaved as much as I could on that side, and then I'm going to flip it on this side. And when you can't shave anymore, snap. Okay, so that's how you do the raw asparagus salad. Now, if you don't want to do any of that shaving, you can, for the raw asparagus salad, just take your knife and just cut really thin slices. So you're going to have a bunch of little round pieces like that. It's just that, you know, raw asparagus is kind of, it's toothy. So you will either want to shave it to make it thin, or you want to cut it so it's thin little circles. And then once you have the olive oil and the lemon on top and some seasoning, it marinates and it gets a little bit less raw flavored. If you really can't stand raw asparagus, you can lightly steam it. Like, let's say steam it for 3-4 minutes just to take some of the bite off of it, and then maybe put a little bit of lemon, olive oil, or butter lemon combination. You'll still get prebiotics that way.
A question, Carrie?
Yeah.
The asparagus, the hard stem, you throw that away, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like way too much fiber for us to masticate. So I'm sure if we could get it past our mouth, our microbiome would like it.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah. All right, my favorite little tuber. So this is sunchoke, and here's 2 varieties. It depends on what your grocery store has. They're both the same in terms of benefit. This one is like a little bit, has a little bit of like purple to it, and it's a little bit smoother. Whereas this one is a little less purple. It's got a lot more knobby stuff on it. And what's awesome is you don't have to peel these. You do want to wash them though, because you can get like some dirt stuck up in there. And this one actually has like a little bit of darkness. So I would just cut that right off. So give them a good wash, and then you can just roast them like the ones that I made for you guys today. Or you could just take your knife and just do slices, thin slices, as thin as possible, and throw that in a salad. So I hope you guys enjoy that when you try them for the first time. They're delightful, but like I said, they're called fart chokes for a reason, so don't go overboard. So that's all I have to demonstrate. We'll finish up with any last questions, and I can send you guys this recording if it was too much information and you want to digest it later, no pun intended.
Question.
Your
Yeah.
thoughts on an air fryer?
I had one once and I liked it, but it wasn't big enough for me. We tend to cook, it's just my husband and I, but we tend to eat a lot of vegetables, and I always wanted like to put in pounds of broccoli because it comes out so well. So I did love it, but it didn't make sense for us. So I just put everything in the convection oven now, and I get kind of a crust on that in the convection oven.
Oh, okay. That's a good thought. Yeah, okay. I'll
How about
try
a-
that.
How about a steamer? Do you have a steamer?
I have an Instant Pot, and in the Instant Pot, there's a steamer function. Are you talking about like for asparagus?
Yeah, I have. It's old. It's 25 years old, but steamer. You gotta add water, and I can steam broccoli, carrots, on corn all at the same time.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that works. Totally.
I just want to say thank you. You did a lovely job.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great to have you. I think this is the first class we've had together, right?
Yeah, I never did it before. This was very nice.
Awesome. Well, great to have you.
What I tend to eat a lot of rice vinegar, and you mentioned about apple cider vinegar. You know, is I assume rice vinegar is just as good? I don't know.
Well, the difference with apple cider vinegar is that it has different enzymes in it and a little bit different nutrient profile because it comes from apples, right? Versus rice. And a lot of the apple cider vinegar that says raw on it, actually you can see the probiotics in there. There's still like particulate matter in there. So you just get a little bit more in there. And it's good, like I was talking about before, diversity is the name of the game. If you take anything from tonight, it's just to try new plant foods, try new vinegars, right? Because they're from plants. So the more diverse your diet gets, the better your gut's going to be for it. So try it out. Apple cider vinegar is lovely.
Carrie, I love apple cider vinegar, but it gives me heartburn. Is there a way I can eat it so that I don't get heartburn?
Try just drops of it instead of tablespoons of it.
On food or plain?
Oh, always with food. If you take apple cider vinegar on an empty stomach, it'll give anybody heartburn because it's acid.
Oh, no, I eat it with food. Remember you told me to put it on the side of your food and just drink with your food?
Yeah, that's for specific cases. So again, you and I can talk one-on-one about that.
We gave the name. What vinegar are we using?
Any other questions from the group?
No, thanks, Carrie. I really enjoyed it.
Okay,
Me
awesome.
too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Carrie, one more question.
Yeah.
On probiotics, what is a good one if you want to get a supplement? I'm trying to get something for my son.
I'm a big fan of the soil-based probiotics right now. One of them is called Megaspore Biotic. And what I like about that one is that it encourages the growth of other good bacteria. It doesn't just provide what the probiotic has in it. So that's the issue we found with probiotic supplements is that whatever's in there, we take them in and it goes through us and it only benefits us while it's in us, while we take it. However, these new soil-based probiotics have this beneficial effect. It's like they're the cool popular kids and all the
other bacteria in the gut want to be around it, and they grow better in the presence of these soil-based bacteria. So I see that as a better long-term solution to gut health, is taking soil-based bacteria to boost up the system.
Right, that would be something for me, but for him who's young and doesn't have any GI issue or gut problems that we know of,
I think the balsamic is from grapes.
or something on, you know, over the counter or something more accessible.
Just Thrive probiotic is a good one. That's a little bit more accessible. You can buy that at most like natural food stores now.
Just try.
Just Thrive. Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is balsamic vinegar from grapes?
It should be. Yep. It should be from red grapes. The ingredient should say grape must.
Okay, because there's white balsamic as well as dark balsamic. So the dark probably is better for you. Okay.
Yeah, you'll get more of the, like I was saying, the red onions are better for you. Usually like the darker in color, like we talked about the Akkermansia bacteria loves red. So red grapes are what makes balsamic.
Yeah. Okay.
But does it have sulfate in it?
Most grape products do have sulfates.
That
It's an
okay?
essential part. Is it okay? Well, for most people it is. All right, well, I will be sure to upload this video of the presentation in the Get Healthy account that you signed up for this with. That way you have access, you can go back and listen to it. So I want to wish everyone safe and happy holidays, and thanks for joining me. I'll probably do another one of these in January if you want to get on board again, learn some new things. If you have suggestions about what you want to learn, you can, send me an email. Everyone has my email now from this morning.
Just one more thing, to pick up the food, how do I arrange to be curbside, to be taken down?
You can call the apothecary.
Tell them? Okay.
Yep, tell them you're here to pick up your cooking class food.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Context of a place where if you do develop an allergic reaction, it could be readily